Well, howdy again everyone, and today I'm taking a look at an old fast standard zoom lens from Sigma for full frame cameras, the Sigma 24-70mm f2.8 EXDG macro. This is not the newer HSM version of the lens, so don't get confused. I actually ordered the newer HSM version from the lens hire company for testing over Christmas time, but they sent me this ropey old thing instead. Naughty naughty. But I thought I'd test it out anyway. You can find these older lenses over on eBay for about £200 or $250 or even less, depending on their condition. A zoom lens with an aperture as wide as f2.8 is a useful thing. Particularly on a full frame camera, f2.8 means you can get nicely out of focus backgrounds, particularly as you zoom in. The 24-70mm focal range gives you nice, wide angles, but not that much in the way of telephoto reach, so it wouldn't be a great lens for, say, wildlife photography. But it would be very suitable for shooting a wedding, for example, if the image quality of the lens is good enough. It will also work on an APS-C camera, where you'll lose the potentially wide-angle fields of view, but 70mm will yield more telephoto images. This lens does not feature image stabilization, so your handheld video might be a bit shaky. The build quality of this lens is old school Sigma. It's fairly large and tough, with that unpleasant matte finish Sigma lenses used to have. The lens is based on a metal mount without weather sealing, and towards the bottom there's the zoom ring, which turns the opposite way to Canon's lenses and not very smoothly. In fact, it turns very unevenly with varying resistance. Interestingly, when you zoom in to 70mm, the front of the lens retracts into the body. It's normally the other way round. I've only ever seen this behaviour on the old Canon 24-70mm f2.8L lens, the original one, and that lens took advantage of this by offering a very deep lens hood. Unfortunately, the Sigma lens's hood does no such thing, and it really is a bit too narrow to be very effective. The focus mechanism is Sigma's notorious old dual focus system. For manual focus, you need to set it to manual focus on the bottom of the lens and pull down the focus ring. For autofocus, you need to flip the switch at the bottom and push the focus ring back up. Kind of annoying, but at least in manual focus, the ring turns quite smoothly. The autofocus motor on this lens works quickly and pretty loudly, as you can hear. The accuracy of the autofocus on my copy of the lens was abysmal. Half the time it would just completely miss, and at 70mm it would not focus in live view mode at all, although I have a theory why that could be, which I'll share in a minute. Clearly there was something a little wrong with this copy of the lens. It was a nightmare to work with. The lens's filter thread is a very large 82mm wide, making filters an expensive option. Overall, the word I would use to describe this lens's build quality is dated. Perhaps the lens's optics can offer redemption. We'll start on a full frame camera, my 20MP Canon 6D. At 24mm and f2.8, the lens is very nice and sharp in the middle, but the corners are extremely soft. As we stop down to f4, f5.6, f8, and finally f11, we finally get a usable image. Not good. Zoom in halfway to 40mm and we continue to see quite a sharp image in the middle at f2.8. This time, thankfully, the corners look decent enough. At f4 they're reasonably sharp, and stop down to f8 for another improvement. And finally, we zoom all the way into 70mm. At f2.8 the lens is a touch soft in the middle and a little softer again over in the corners, although we're not seeing much in the way of chromatic aberration here, which is one good thing. There's only a small improvement when you stop down to f4, although stop all the way down to f8 for some good sharpness. So on a full frame camera, the lens really takes us on an optical rollercoaster ride. Generally, central sharpness is quite good, although contrast is never very impressive. The corners are okay once you zoom in and stop down the lens's aperture. When used at f8 or f11, you can trust the lens to give you good images. So just for a laugh, let's see about the lens's performance on APS-C with my little 24 megapixel Canon EOS M3. At 24mm and f2.8, the lens is soft and ghostly in the middle with very poor contrast, and the corners of the image are even softer with noticeable chromatic aberration too. Stop down to f4 and the edges look a touch clearer, and the image quality is very good back in the middle. Even with the aperture stopped down further than this though, I found no improvement in image quality from this point. Let's zoom in to 40mm. At f2.8, image quality is quite good in the middle, and again soft in the corners. There is some improvement at f4 and f5.6, but that's as sharp as you get. And finally, 70mm. At f2.8, the lens is very soft in the middle of your images. This is the best manually focused image I could get. No wonder the autofocus didn't work in live view mode. The lens was too soft for any kind of contrast detection. The lens remains dreadfully soft over in the corners. At f4, there's a tiny improvement there, and the middle of the image is looking a touch better, but still rather poor. At f5.6 though, resolution is good enough in the middle, and still a bit soft in the corners. And again, there's no further improvement as you stop down from here. So essentially, I'd consider the lens unusable on an APS-C camera. I've never tested a lens that was so soft that the camera couldn't effectively autofocus with it. Well, let's move on now and see about vignetting and distortion on a full frame camera. At 24mm, barrel distortion is not too bad actually, but it is noticeable. Vignetting is strong, but pushed into the corners, not really a pretty sight. Even stopped down to f5.6, it makes its presence known. Once you zoom into 28mm, distortion is pretty much gone. At 70mm we see some pincushion distortion, and vignetting again from f2.8, which sticks around even if you stop down to f5.6. So the lens deals with distortion a tiny bit better than the average standard zoom lens, but there are vignetting issues. The lens can focus as closely as about 38cm, bringing you potentially quite close to your subjects. Unfortunately, close-up image quality is very soft at f2.8, and really even stop down to f4, it's not much better. Let's see about flaring then. That's another very serious black mark for this lens. At 24mm, the lens displays a terrific amount of flaring if the sun is near your picture or in your picture, and when you zoom into 70mm, things get even worse, as the sun will cause a big loss in contrast, even if it's only in the lens's general direction. You should use the lens's hood at all times, but even then, you'll come across problems. Finally, bokeh. I have something good to say, as the autofocus backgrounds are rendered quite smoothly with this lens. Just occasionally, you'll see some awkward looking patterns emerging though. On the whole, having this lens in front of your camera is a pretty horrible experience, and it's optics like this that gave Sigma lenses such a poor reputation back in the day, which they've had to fight off in recent years. I 100% did not enjoy testing this lens out, having to do battle with its useless autofocus system and getting low contrast pictures, and it's not exactly a sharp lens either, so avoid this old Sigma lens at all costs is what I advise you.